Healthcare is changing, and Dr. Nancy RN is here for you. The topics are many, but each program stands on its own with 3 key action points for you to learn. Your guide to a healthier you in a changing world. Dr. Nancy RN.
Welcome to Dr. Nancy RN. Healthy you, healthy nation, healthy world. I'm Nancy Valentine, PhD and registered nurse. And this show is dedicated to you, the healthcare consumer. We hope that what we talk about on our shows will help you in your journey to health and wellness. And to that end, I have a very distinguished guest with me this afternoon, Dr. Joseph Libinati. Dr. Libinati is a professor at the University of Pennsylvania School of Nursing. And in his role, he is also the director of the Laboratory of Innovative and Translational Nursing Research, which is part of the Department of Biobehavioral Health Sciences in the School of Nursing. Now, Joe is one of the few non-nurses on faculty, and he uses his special expertise to inform the faculty and to help the students in their journey to become excellent nurses. Now, his background is as an exercise physiologist, he has both clinical and basic research experience. He has studied the influence of exercise cardiovascular function in a variety of diseases, including heart failure, hypertension, myocardial infarction, and obesity. He is a fellow of the American Heart Association and is chair of the American Heart Association's Cardiac Biology and a Special Studies section. So what he is going to be talking with us today is around exercise with your heart. So we decided to call this show Affairs of the Heart because it is really a true love affair that you want to have with your heart. And he's going to tell us about the impact of exercise on your heart. So he's going to be covering the following areas. He's going to talk about your heart and how it works, coronary blood flow, and he's also going to talk about when you exercise, how your heart changes, how the beat changes, how you actually can strengthen your heart. And then he's going to help us with the best exercises for heart health. And I want to welcome you, Joe. It's a pleasure to have you back on our show. And I think that what we will gain from this is what we can do to prevent any heart problems. And if you do have heart problems that have been diagnosed, how to improve your heart's function. And again, I want to just stress to our listeners that Joe's background in physiology is both from working with people, he's done a lot of work with different individuals, with teams, but he's also a lab guy. He's actually in labs studying animals and looking at their response to exercise. And he's doing some very, very interesting work, which we hope he will touch on, and what he's learning from those lab animals and how that will eventually translate to our health. Thank you, Joe, again for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me, Nancy. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're most welcome. So tell us about your work and how you even got involved in it. I mean, you're not just an exercise guy. You're an exercise guy with a mission and a scientist. Now, that's a wonderful combination.
I became interested in physiology and exercise physiology, way back when in college, because I was interested in learning about the physiologic processes of the body in order to try to become a better athlete. I was a somewhat mediocre basketball player, and I wanted to figure out how I could become a better basketball player. So I started studying muscles and heart function and vascular function, and then it sort of spiraled into trying to help people with heart disease and diabetes. I worked at the Pritikin Longevity Center and the Robert Wood Johnson Cardiac Rehabilitation Center in New Brunswick, New Jersey for a few years. And as I became more involved in the clinical practice, I wanted to learn about the basic science behind some of the great success stories we had seen with patients and various persons that were participating in these different regimens, and became enthralled with the heart and its central role in dictating how we function, and have been studying it it's almost 25 years now. So it's been a long time.
That's a fantastic journal. So I mean, you could have made some videotapes and taken the marketing route, you know, and get everybody up and moving. Or in your case, what you decided was to take that deeper dive and look at the science of the heart and how exercise really influences the heart.
Yes, and it is a very complicated organ, as you well know, and there's many aspects to the way the heart functions and how we might go at it to make it better, because in our society, 1 out of every 3 deaths is related to heart disease, and the numbers are large. There's a death every 60 seconds from heart disease. 6 million people now with heart failure, billions of dollars in healthcare costs, and with the baby boomers starting to you know, enter the you know, mid to latter years, heart failure is really going to become even a greater issue, and we need to be able to find ways, both from human cost as well as from a financial cost, to try to improve heart function, you know, across the age span, from kids all the way out to our elders, in order to improve the health of our society. So it has a really big public health role. Right.
That's a big goal right there, because most people are not necessarily aware that heart disease is such a #1 killer, and if it doesn't kill you, it makes your life pretty miserable for a long time before you actually die, if you don't take care of yourself.
Yeah, that's a big one. You want to have your latter years where you can enjoy your life. You know, you've worked all these years, and it's now time to go out and play again, and you don't want to be compromised.
Right. So tell us about what you've learned and how you've applied it.
Well, you know, to make it simple, being physically active is really important to make your heart beat in an optimal fashion. And that is true both from the animal studies that you've alluded to, as well as the sort of public health epidemiological studies that have been out there. And so there are several pathways or mechanisms by which exercise and physical activity are really beneficial for your heart. And the first one is on the coronary blood vessels. And the coronary blood vessels that are important in heart disease are the coronary arteries. They're the arteries that feed your heart with blood flow so that your heart itself can take up its nutrients, and you know, it's the hardest working muscle of your body, beating 70 or 80 times a minute every minute of your entire life. And so it needs a great supply of energy in order to maintain that high level of metabolism.
So describe for our viewers, because many people haven't taken anatomy and physiology, so when you're talking about the heart and these particular coronary arteries, where are they in the heart? Like on the heart, inside the heart? I mean, not that people are necessarily going to be looking inside their own bodies, but just so they have some kind of a visual picture of what it looks like and what it could look like better if you had more exercise. Like, how does it change? So
these coronary arteries are pretty visible from the external surface of your heart. So if you kind of picture your heart as this, you know, this pumping chamber, you have 2 main coronary arteries, one on the left side and one on the right side, and they come off of the big blood vessel that emerges from your heart, the aorta.
Right.
And then these blood vessels, you know, one kind of feeds the left side of the heart, one feeds the right side of the heart, and then they delve deeper and deeper down into that heart muscle, and it gets progressively smaller. And so the left side of your heart is faced with pumping the blood out to your entire body, your brain, your kidneys, your feet, etc. And the pressures are very high there. So it really has to squeeze to get that blood on out through the aorta out to the rest of your body. And so it requires its own nutrients coming into that left coronary artery primarily, but not exclusively, to feed it with every single beat. Now, the obvious problem is if you take one of those arteries and you kind of look at it in the cross-section, if there's plaque development, disease development, kind of like a pipe being clogged, now the flow can't make it to the heart as well as it could if the pipe was actually clean. And now every time the heart beats, it's not getting that optimal flow, and that can in part cause that heart to become a little dysfunctional, and could even offer symptoms to the person that might be experiencing that coronary artery disease, where they're feeling maybe a heaviness or a shortness of breath. Not a heart attack necessarily, but a symptom that just something doesn't quite feel right. Around a heaviness, right, around and about my neck, even sometimes up into my jaw or my back, my scapulae, that sort of thing. So you've got to maintain clear or as clear coronary arteries as possible. Mm-hmm. And it's a progressive disease, coronary artery disease, that, you know, it starts back in your teens and it gets worse and worse, or the pipes get more and more and more clogged over time. And then when they're like critically stenosed or narrowed, you know, maybe 70 or 80% narrowed, then that's when often bad events occur, heart attack and that sort of thing. But it doesn't even have to be that stenosed for the heart attack to occur. There are young people that even have some of that plaque or some of that disease that's not sort of solidified, where it can break off and cause a little clot to kind of mobilize and you know, go into one of the smaller blood vessels downstream and then cause damage. So it's really, really important to try to keep the supply or the coronary artery blood flow good. Right.
So if you were to think about this in the most simplistic terms, I mean, just so we can all remind ourselves about, you know, how critically important our heart is, it's really like the major pump of the body, and the coronary arteries that Joe just described, it's really the plumbing for the heart. You know, that's really what feeds one side, and the other side really pushes the blood out to the rest of our body. So the idea of how we can influence this plumbing piece, because that's the key to success for the rest of the heart muscle, to keep that pump functioning optimally. Why would exercise make a difference? Because obviously diet, you know, with these young people eating so many fast foods, fatty foods, things that are really not nutritional, that's obviously contributing to this. And it's really hard to get people to change those diets, especially at those ages. So do you think that this exercise prescription really helps to offset some of the diet problems? Or tell us, like, sort of how it works, because people may think, well, gosh, they're going to get clogged anyway. What can I do? It's sort of like a fact of life.
So, you know, I think there was a mystery back in, you know, as far back as the 1950s about what made the plumbing get clogged. Mm-hmm. And there were experiments, surveys done in Massachusetts, Framingham, Massachusetts, that started to identify clusters of factors that were linked to the plumbing being clogged. Things like your cholesterol and your blood pressure and your blood glucose levels, whether or not you were a smoker. Mm-hmm. More recently, now we've identified that if you're sedentary and not physically active, this is right on up there. Being obese is right on up there. There is a series of behaviors, when they cluster together, they make you more apt to have your plumbing clogged over time. Mm-hmm. So each one has its own nuances. Each one of those risk factors has its own nuance. I mean, you want to maintain good blood glucose, because in and of itself, that can cause the plumbing to be clogged. Cholesterol, obviously, in and of itself, could cause the plumbing to be clogged. Exercise is really important because in and of itself, it changes the way the blood vessels work, but it also mitigates those other risk factors to a great extent. For example, exercise is good for your energy balance, and that would make you have a more favorable body composition. If you're less fat, you're less apt to have diabetes, mm-hmm. or even impaired fasting glucose levels, and that makes your blood pressure better. So right off the bat, exercise has a really good impact on your body composition, your glucose sensitivity, as well as your blood pressure, making those blood vessels less apt to be, you know, clogged with disease.
Right. Let me just ask
Yes,
you, because
please.
I think we need to translate for people that really don't understand what glucose level in the blood really means. I mean, that is basically a sugar. Can you describe for people, just so they understand, you know, that we're looking at things that you can actually measure? So glucose levels in the blood means what?
It's your blood sugar. Your blood sugar is really important because it goes into your cells and it feeds those cells. And often what happens as people get older and they lose the ability of the hormone insulin, which is necessary to help that sugar migrate across into cells, when they lose that sensitivity or that sort of helping function of insulin, now the sugar can't get into the cell so easily and it stays in your blood. Now this is a big concern because not only from heart disease, but it's damaging to your kidneys, to your eyes, to your brain. And so we need to maintain our blood sugar levels at a reasonable level, and that's easily measured in laboratories that your healthcare provider sends your blood tests to and whatnot.
Right. I think that's an important point that Joe made, because if you go for your routine visit to your primary care provider, one of the tests that they run is your glucose level. That is a very basic test, and that's the kind of thing that you can get a number on, and your doctor will tell you, or your nurse practitioner will tell you, you know, what the range is, and if you're in the range, if you're not. Even though Joe is very, very experienced with the cellular level of what's going on in the body, and you may not need to know, you know, all the intricacies of that, what he's really telling us is that all of this works together. So, for instance, the risk factors that he's talked about, obesity, if you are not metabolizing, meaning using the sugar that is coming into your body, and that doesn't mean like you're eating candy bars or cookies all day long. Sugar is in a lot of the foods that we eat. All the carbohydrates, you know, the breads, the pasta, lots of those things are really in the carbohydrate. Glucose, it gets converted to glucose in the blood. You need to really be at least aware that these factors are occurring. For some people, it's more of an issue than for others, but nonetheless, it's an issue for everyone. And therefore, on some level, the exercise physiology that he's talking about is going to help you. Even if you don't have that as a major risk factor, it is still a risk for everyone to some degree.
It's the totality, it's the combination of factors. So exercise is something that alleviates many of these risk factors that leads to clogging of these blood vessels.
Right. Now, how about if you know, like in your family, like, you know, a question that's often asked, you know, who in your family has had a heart disease, you know, and it's really hard with those statistics. Like you said, 1 in 3 people have some kind of a heart, is that what you said, 1 in 3 people?
1 in 3, the contribution of cardiovascular disease to death.
To death.
1 in 3.
Right, so there's even more that are walking around with it,
Yes.
as you said. So a lot of people have histories in their families of people that have had serious heart disease or have died of heart disease. So much of what you're talking about is really how can the next generation prevent this? How can they really address this more effectively? And what's your prescription in terms of that kind of prevention?
No, it's a very important point, and so it goes to the argument of nature versus nurture. And you know, I'm not going to be able to provide an answer that's certain, but people think that the genetic family history element of heart disease is about 50% of the variance or the contribution to heart disease. But it's hard to dissect that out because you learn your lifestyle and behavioral and nutritional and activity levels from the parents that you live with or the family that you live with. And so dissecting out the nurture against the genetic elements is quite complicated. We can't really control who are or what our genetics are, but we can control the nurture part by understanding what the science says about what I should be eating and what I should be doing, with the idea of keeping the eye on the ball that I want to try to keep my coronary arteries clean the best that I can, because that's the greatest chance of me getting a disease is that one. So let me do things in my life to try to offset that the best that I can. I think that's really important in taking care of yourself overall. And so exercise, you know, alleviates these risk factors. And then exercise directly goes to the pipe and actually makes the pipe bigger. So this is interesting. Even if there's a plaque development or clumping inside the pipe, it doesn't mean the pipe can't grow. The pipe can actually get wider.
Interesting.
And that's one of the good benefits of exercise, as well as the pipe leads into smaller pipes, and you can actually make more smaller pipes or more capillaries in your heart, therefore better feeding or perfusing your heart with blood.
So you're really making your heart stronger through this exercise.
You're making the blood vessel flow to your heart stronger.
Interesting.
Yes.
I think that's a great offset.
Oh, yes.
Because some people make more plaque than others, and that may be, nutritionally driven, or it may be some physiological issue that is different among different people.
Absolutely.
Some people
yes.
are plaque makers. Even if they have a great diet, they just make more plaque for reasons that maybe we don't fully understand.
We don't understand, and they're, in those types of situations, genetics perhaps play an even larger role, and so there's a huge human toll in this, and that's why the American Heart Association and the National Institutes of Health have as part of their agenda emphasis to try to impact this really kind of terrible disease,
right?
Because it's a big concern,
right? But I think you've really given us a great picture of like what's happening inside of our bodies, which we really can't see, and what motivates people to adopt a regular exercise routine. Some people are motivated by appearance. They want to look better, or they have a weight issue they want to trim down. But this is really like what goes on inside your body. I mean, if you could picture that pump, and if you just say, I really can't see my arteries right now, but maybe, given my family history or my age or my diet, I can like pretty much, guesstimate that maybe they're like 50% clogged. That is a great motivator to think that, from what Joe is telling us, from the research that has been done in this area, that when you do this exercise, you can actually change the plumbing that goes to your heart that really can strengthen the blood flow and can offset some of that plaque. That is, I think, a different kind of a motivator, really a motivation that's very different than what I think you hear most people talking about.
Yeah, I mean, there are, it's still somewhat controversial, but there are programs, stress reduction, really extreme, dietary measures, like the Dean Ornish program, for example, which in my eyes stemmed off of the Pritikin program that I used to be involved with, where it's a very low-fat diet, natural sort of vegetables and fruits and grains, not many processed foods, meditation, yoga, relaxation, and regular physical activity. And both the Ornish program and the Pritikin program, looking at all three arms of that, have suggested, and Ornish has actually shown with catheterization results, that even if you have a bunch of plaque already formed in your artery, you can cause that plaque to go away to some extent. So you could reverse the heart disease. Now, there are many folks that don't buy that, and the data aren't super convincing, but there are data to support it, and more work needs to be done. It's not an irreversible process necessarily, is the point. There's wherever you are in the heart disease continuum, by taking positive lifestyle actions, you can improve the function of that plumbing. And that's really, really important. I tell people, if you can run. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk slower. If you can't walk slower, crawl. I mean, do something. Do something, whatever it takes, do something, because there are benefits associated. We're meant to move. Right.
Well, I think the irony of some of this is, if you really reflect on cardiology as a science, as a field of intervention, when people do have heart attacks, what's one of the first things they get assigned to when they are discharged from the hospital is cardiac rehab. What's that mean? You get on a stationary bike, you start at your own pace, you start swimming, you start doing other kinds of weight-bearing exercises, maybe doing some lifting of weights. Really everybody's prescription is somewhat different. But it's almost like after you have the event, it's suddenly, exercise is a huge prescriptive variable. I mean, and what you're talking about is we don't have to wait for that event where it's like almost too late. You know, we could really start way back here and really be developing that heart muscle in preparation for a longer life and hopefully not even having some of these events.
So that's a very critical point. I think that I mean, the first, you know, arm is to stop the progression of the disease in the first place.
Right.
But even if you've had that heart attack, you need to, with your clinician approval, now start to get back and to become functional again. And even beyond the physical benefits, the psychological benefits of being afraid to become physical again. You know, that's where things like cardiac rehab and becoming really back tuned in with your body are critical. They give you the confidence, they teach you what you can do. You've got nurses often supervising these programs with electrodes on your chest to make sure everything's okay. And then you get confident again. I can do this. You feel you're improving your fitness and your function, and then you could go out and, you know, climb those stairs and have kind of a normal life again by understanding what's within your realm of being able to do. So very, very important.
I think based on what Joe's saying, I can see, you know, healthcare in the future, and the future is now, especially with healthcare reform, that when you are diagnosed with either a family history or some early signs and symptoms of cardiac disease, that in addition to the medications that your primary care doctor or your cardiologist in a consult situation would be prescribing for you, really exercise is every bit as important as some of these drugs. I
would argue, you know, I'm a little prejudiced towards it. It's probably equal with diet and nutrition as being, you know, the prime determinant of lifestyle.
Right.
You know, smoking is obviously important as well.
Right.
Don't smoke. Try to eat well. But even if you smoke, if you're physically active, your risk of cardiovascular disease is less than a person who doesn't smoke and is inactive.
Right.
And so that really shows how activity can modulate other risk factors.
Right. Well, I think you've really covered our topic as far as you've explained about coronary blood flow. You've told us about how the heart muscle actually changes, how our hearts get stronger. And you were going to tell us a little bit about the best exercises for heart health.
So the best exercises for heart health are aerobic exercises, or aerobic physical activity, which means you use large muscle groups and you use those muscle groups repetitively. And so that, you know, what are good examples would be something like walking or running or riding a bike or an elliptical or some of, you know, these various dance classes. Now we have the Wii gaming, that you can do the virtual gaming. You know, that often some of those games become aerobic, and you know, you don't even really need to leave the house. You can just kind of play them with the video screen, that sort of thing. And the idea is to do that on a regular basis. The FIT acronym is the frequency of the activity most days of the week. That's the F. The I is the intensity of the activity. You should move where you're breathing a little bit more vigorously, but you could still have a conversation.
Okay.
And the time is, you should do 30 to 60 minutes per day, with the goal of trying to accrue 150 minutes or more per week of this physical activity. The biggest key is find something you like. If you don't like riding a bike, that would not be the choice. Maybe you prefer swimming. Well, then find a place where you can regularly swim, but have it available to you. I mean, studies have shown the further you have to travel to get that exercise modality, the less apt you are to stay with it. It needs to be part of your life.
Right, it does. Well, I want to say that, you know, that's a tall order. I'm definitely going to have to ramp up my exercise routine, but I recently took a Zumba class, and that was a lot of fun. The only exercise class that I've taken where everybody's clapping through the class because we're having such a nice time.
Right.
So whatever it is for you, I encourage you to take the advice that we've gotten today from Dr. Joseph Libinati And as I said earlier, he's a professor, associate professor at the University of Pennsylvania School of Nursing, where the science of caring makes all the difference. Thank you very much for being with us, Joseph.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day. I hope you enjoyed our conversation today and that the information will help you in meeting your health goals. Catch this program and other conversations on the website, drnancyrn.com. Or you can write to me as well. I welcome your comments and feedback. Thank you for listening and join us again. And remember, with health, all things are possible.